This is a story about how a 19-year-old girl disguised herself as deaf. Her name was Lila. She lived with her father in a small, messy house. Her father drank a lot and often hit her mother. Lila saw her mother cry many times, and it scared her. She knew her father could become very angry if he was upset. Lila decided to protect herself and her mother. She began pretending she could not hear anything. When her father shouted at her, she would not answer. When he asked questions, she would look confused. Over time, he stopped expecting her to respond. Her father's drinking made him careless. He became more violent and ignored the housework and bills. Lila's mother tried to keep things calm, but she could not stop her husband. Lila stayed quiet, learning what she could do without upsetting him. One day, her father got very angry over money he had lost. He yelled at Lila, but she did not answer. He hit the walls instead of her. Lila realized he was losing patience with her silence. She pretended more seriously now, acting like she could not hear anything at all. She even pretended to be involved in a small accident at home, which made her act as if she had completely lost her hearing. Her father became frustrated. He thought she was useless because he could not talk to her. Her father decided to sell her. He found a buyer who said he could take her away. Lila felt scared but also relieved. She knew she could not stay in that house any longer. The buyer was a billionaire who owned a large ranch. When she arrived, he looked at her coldly. He said she would do small chores on the ranch. Lila could not speak, but she watched and listened carefully. She wanted to survive. She learned quickly. She cleaned, cooked, and ran errands without complaints. She observed everything around her and tried to do her work perfectly. Even though the billionaire did not smile or speak warmly to her, Lila kept working hard. Lila woke up early the next day on the ranch. The sun was bright, and the air smelled clean and fresh. She did not know much about ranch life, but she wanted to do everything correctly. She fed the animals, cleaned the barns, and swept the floors. She listened carefully to the other workers, trying to understand what they needed. The billionaire watched her silently. He rarely spoke to her, and sometimes he seemed annoyed by her presence. Lila did not complain. She learned quickly which tasks he expected her to do first and which ones she could handle later. She remembered every detail he showed her. At first, the other workers ignored her. They thought she could not communicate and would be a problem. But Lila proved them wrong. She helped where she could, carried heavy loads without asking for help, and never made mistakes. Slowly, they began to respect her. Lila started cleaning her small room neatly. She washed her clothes carefully and arranged her few belongings in order. Even though she could not speak, she made the space feel clean and welcoming. The billionaire noticed this and nodded slightly, a small sign that he approved. Over time, Lila learned to dress neatly. She wore clean clothes that fit well, combed her hair carefully, and kept herself tidy. She understood that appearance mattered, even if she could not speak. Her confidence began to show quietly in the way she walked and worked. The billionaire started giving her more important tasks. He asked her to deliver messages to other workers and take care of special chores around the house. Lila performed them perfectly. She observed everything carefully and remembered details about the ranch, the animals, and the people. One evening, the billionaire asked her to follow him to check the horses. He spoke few words, but Lila noticed his tone. She acted as if she could not hear him at first, then showed that she understood by moving quickly to help. He watched her with a curious expression, as if noticing her intelligence for the first time. Lila smiled quietly to herself. She knew she had to stay strong and smart. She had survived her father's cruelty, and the hard life on the ranch was another challenge. But she was ready. She was learning, growing, and slowly becoming someone the billionaire could not ignore. Lila woke up early again, as usual. She had learned the ranch routine and moved quickly without waiting for instructions. She fed the horses, watered the plants, and cleaned the barns. Even though she could not speak, she made sure her work was done perfectly. The billionaire began noticing small things about her. He saw how carefully she handled the animals, how neatly she arranged tools, and how quickly she learned new tasks. He still spoke little to her, but his eyes followed her more often now. Lila started observing the way the billionaire worked. She noticed he liked things organized in a certain way, and she tried to arrange everything to his style. When she did this, he sometimes nodded quietly, almost like a small smile. Lila felt a little hope. She also began helping the other workers. She carried water for them, helped feed animals faster, and offered small gestures without expecting thanks. They were surprised by her intelligence and effort. Some of them even started whispering about how clever she was, even though she did not speak. One day, the billionaire gave her a task he had not given her before. He asked her to deliver important supplies to a part of the ranch far away. He spoke quickly, and Lila pretended not to hear. Then she studied his gestures and followed instructions exactly. When she returned, everything was perfect. He looked at her differently. Lila began showing more confidence in the way she moved and worked. She started wearing clothes neatly, tying her hair back properly, and keeping her posture straight. People began noticing her beauty as well as her intelligence. Even without speaking, she was becoming someone hard to ignore. That night, she thought about her father. She remembered how cruel he had been, how he had sold her because he thought she was useless. She felt sadness, but also strength. She had survived that life, and now she was slowly building a new life for herself. Lila lay in her small room, tired but satisfied. She knew the billionaire had begun noticing her. She understood that to truly survive and thrive, she needed to continue learning, observing, and showing her value quietly. She felt a small spark of hope that maybe, one day, she could earn his trust completely. Lila started learning small ways to communicate without speaking. She used gestures, expressions, and careful movements to show she understood tasks. The billionaire noticed this and began giving her more complicated chores, like managing the supplies and organizing the workers. She also began studying the ranch closely. She noticed which animals were sick, which fields needed water, and even small problems the workers did not see. She quietly fixed these problems before anyone noticed. The billionaire saw her checking on things and began trusting her more. Her appearance continued to improve. She washed her clothes carefully, braided her hair, and started dressing neatly. Even though she did not speak, she carried herself with confidence. The other workers began to look at her differently. They respected her and sometimes asked her advice. The billionaire still remained distant. He rarely smiled, rarely spoke, and sometimes seemed impatient. But Lila noticed his small gestures, a nod, a quick glance, or a silent acknowledgement when her work was done well. She understood that she had begun earning his attention. One day, he gave her a special task. He asked her to handle a delivery alone. Lila pretended she could not hear the instructions fully, but paid close attention to his gestures. She completed the task flawlessly. The billionaire raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised at how capable she was. Lila felt a small thrill of pride. She knew she had made a difference, and she knew that slowly, the billionaire was beginning to respect her. She realized that, even without speaking, she could show her worth. That night, she sat quietly in her room. She thought about the life she had left behind, about her father, and about how far she had come. For the first time, she felt a small sense of freedom. The billionaire started watching her more closely during the day. He noticed how she handled the animals, how she organized things, and even how she remembered small details he had told her weeks ago. He wondered if maybe she understood more than she let on. Lila also noticed him watching her. She started testing small ways to communicate. She used gestures, expressions, and subtle nods to show she could understand instructions without making him realize she could hear perfectly. The workers began talking to her quietly, asking questions and seeking advice. Lila helped them with patience and intelligence. Even though she could not speak, she made herself understood. Her confidence grew stronger every day. Her beauty became more noticeable. She learned to dress in clean, neat clothes that fit well. Her hair was tidy and her posture straight. The billionaire started glancing at her differently, noticing her presence more. One afternoon, he asked her to accompany him to check the northern pastures. Lila followed quietly but performed every task with care. He noticed how intelligent and attentive she was. For the first time, he wondered if she really was deaf. That night, Lila practiced small ways to test him. She listened carefully and responded silently. She knew she could fool him if she wanted. She felt powerful, knowing she could control what he believed. She realized she was beginning to enjoy her new life. The work was hard, but it gave her control, confidence, and a sense of safety she had never felt before. Days passed, and Lila's skills continued to improve. She learned to manage tasks efficiently, organize workers, and handle difficult animals. The billionaire still remained cold, but relied on her more and more. She began to subtly show her intelligence in ways he could not ignore. When something went wrong, she fixed it before he noticed. When workers made mistakes, she quietly corrected them. He began watching her more often, noticing small things. Her confidence grew. She walked taller, dressed neatly, and moved with care. Even though she pretended to be deaf, she now commanded respect without saying a word. One day, the billionaire tested her. He gave her complicated instructions quickly. Lila acted confused but followed everything perfectly. He stared at her for a long time, realizing she understood more than she let on. She began feeling a strange connection to him. He was harsh and cold, but she saw glimpses of fairness when he acknowledged her work. She started feeling curious about him, about his life and his heart. The workers continued to respect her and sometimes even whispered about how clever and beautiful she had become. Lila felt a mix of pride and caution. She wanted to stay strong and survive, but she also began noticing her own feelings toward the billionaire. At night, she lay awake thinking about her past, her father, and how different her life was now. For the first time, she believed she could have a life of her own. The billionaire began giving her tasks that involved decision-making. He asked her to manage supplies, oversee some workers, and check on the animals without direct supervision. Lila handled everything flawlessly. She realized he was slowly trusting her. She kept pretending to be deaf, but inside, she listened and learned everything. She noticed his moods, the way he worked, and even how he reacted to small problems on the ranch. Her beauty and confidence continued to grow. She learned to dress neatly for every task, comb her hair carefully, and move gracefully. Workers began admiring her, and the billionaire noticed her presence more than ever. One day, he spoke to her in a low, sharp voice. Lila pretended not to hear. He repeated his instructions slowly. She followed them perfectly, letting him believe she could not hear clearly. He seemed frustrated but impressed. At night, Lila thought about him. She realized she was curious about him, about why he was so cold, and why he seemed to notice her so much. She felt a small warmth, a new feeling she had never experienced before. She practiced small gestures and ways to communicate silently. She wanted to see how much he really noticed. She understood that trust would be key if she wanted to stay safe and gain his attention. The billionaire started paying attention to small details about her. He noticed how carefully she cleaned, how neatly she arranged tools, and how she remembered instructions he had given weeks ago. Lila realized she was slowly winning his trust. She continued pretending to be deaf, but secretly understood everything. She began using gestures and subtle signals to communicate without speaking. Her confidence grew every day. She started walking and standing in a way that showed strength. Even though she had no words, her presence commanded respect. Workers listened when she suggested things. One day, he gave her a complicated task involving multiple workers and animals. Lila organized everything perfectly, fixing problems before they happened. He watched her quietly, clearly impressed. She noticed that his tone had changed slightly when he spoke to her. He was less cold, more curious. Lila felt a strange mix of pride and excitement. She realized she had begun to affect him in ways she did not expect. At night, she thought about her life before the ranch. She had been sold by her father, left alone, and forced to survive. Now, she felt a sense of power she had never known. She knew she could thrive here. The billionaire began to test her more often. He gave instructions in a normal voice, faster than before, to see if she could follow. Lila acted confused but completed everything perfectly. He started noticing small things she did that showed intelligence and awareness. He caught her reading his expressions, noticing details, and responding without speaking. He began to doubt whether she was truly deaf. Lila continued to dress neatly and carry herself with confidence. Her beauty, intelligence, and quiet strength made people notice her, including the billionaire. He watched her more, trying to understand her. She also began helping him in unexpected ways. When small problems appeared on the ranch, she solved them before anyone noticed. Her presence became important, even if he refused to admit it. The billionaire started speaking to her in short, careful sentences. He seemed curious but cautious. Lila listened quietly, pretending not to hear everything, but followed instructions perfectly. At night, Lila thought about her feelings. She realized she had begun to care about him. It was strange to like someone so cold and harsh, but she could not deny the curiosity and warmth she felt. The billionaire finally began noticing her in a new way. He saw her intelligence, her ability to manage tasks, and her quiet strength. He could no longer ignore her presence. Lila continued pretending to be deaf, but she subtly tested him. She followed instructions, helped with difficult tasks, and proved her worth silently. Her appearance and confidence were stronger than ever. She dressed neatly, moved gracefully, and worked with precision. Workers respected her, and the billionaire's cold demeanor began to soften when she was around. One day, he spoke to her differently. He asked questions and watched her carefully. Lila acted as if she could not hear perfectly, but responded with gestures and clever movements. He began to suspect that she was hiding something. She felt a small thrill. She realized she had begun to capture his attention and curiosity. For the first time, she saw that he might see her as more than just a worker. That night, Lila reflected on how far she had come. From being sold by her father and pretending to be deaf, she had grown into a confident, intelligent, and beautiful young woman. She knew the billionaire had begun noticing her, and she was ready for the next stage of her life. The billionaire could not stop noticing Lila. He watched her closely as she worked, impressed by her intelligence, attention to detail, and quiet confidence. He still tried to act cold, but his curiosity grew every day. Lila continued pretending to be deaf. She followed his instructions perfectly and solved problems silently. She used gestures and subtle signs to communicate, keeping him unsure of what she truly knew. One day, he asked her to help with a difficult task in the stables. She completed it perfectly, fixing a problem he had not expected her to notice. He stared at her, realizing she understood everything he said. Lila smiled quietly to herself. She had been waiting for this moment. She could finally test how much he knew she could hear. She deliberately followed a tricky instruction and let him see her clever solution. The billionaire's suspicion grew. He watched her closely, speaking slowly and clearly, testing if she really understood. Lila pretended she didn't hear fully, but responded perfectly. Finally, he paused, realizing she was not deaf at all. That evening, he confronted her quietly. You can hear me?" he asked. Lila nodded slightly, smiling faintly. She finally revealed the truth in a safe way. The billionaire was surprised, but also impressed. For the first time, their relationship shifted. He looked at her differently, with respect and curiosity. Lila knew she had earned not just his attention, but also a small part of his heart. After revealing she could hear, Lila began showing more of her personality. She talked clearly, explained her clever solutions, and suggested ways to improve the ranch. The billionaire listened carefully, realizing how intelligent she truly was. He started treating her differently. He gave her more responsibilities, asked her opinion, and even smiled at her sometimes. Lila had gained his trust completely. The workers noticed the change too. They treated her with even more respect. Lila's beauty, intelligence, and courage had transformed her life completely. She had gone from being sold by her father to becoming someone important on the ranch. Lila also noticed her own feelings. She admired him, not just for his power, but for the way he gradually began to show care and fairness. She felt something new and exciting, a spark of love. The billionaire began observing her closely. He realized he had been cold for so long, but now he felt drawn to her intelligence, her confidence, and her strength. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. They spent more time together on the ranch. She learned about his life, his routines, and the things he cared about. He, in turn, began noticing her laughter, her small smiles, and her careful attention to detail. By the end of the day, they sat quietly together, understanding each other without needing many words. Something had changed. Respect had turned into curiosity, and curiosity was turning into something deeper. The billionaire started trusting Lila completely. He shared responsibilities and asked for her advice. She guided the workers, managed tasks, and even suggested improvements to the ranch. He realized she was more capable than many adults he had worked with. Lila's confidence grew even stronger. She spoke clearly, carried herself elegantly, and moved with purpose. Her beauty, intelligence, and presence began to captivate him completely. They started spending time together outside work. She showed him how careful planning could improve the ranch, and he began to enjoy her company. He laughed quietly at her clever ideas and noticed her small gestures of care. One day, he asked her about her past. Lila spoke honestly, telling him about her father and how she had been sold. The billionaire listened silently, and for the first time, he showed real emotion. He realized how strong she had been all her life, surviving cruelty and hardship. His admiration for her grew into a deeper feeling. He saw not just her beauty, but her courage and intelligence. Lila felt her own feelings deepen. She respected him for the way he had begun to change, for his fairness, and for the way he trusted her. Slowly, she realized she was falling in love. By the evening, they stood together on the ranch, looking over the land. Silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was full of understanding, care, and the start of something more. The billionaire finally admitted to himself that he had feelings for Lila. He saw her not as a worker, but as someone special, someone who had changed his life quietly and steadily. Lila, too, understood that her feelings were strong. She had come a long way, from pretending to be deaf to surviving her father, to proving herself on the ranch, to earning his respect. Now, she realized she could trust him with her heart. They started spending more time together intentionally. He taught her about managing the ranch, and she taught him patience and care. Their bond grew stronger with each day. One evening, he took her hand gently. "You've changed everything here," he said softly. "I don't know what I would do without you." Lila felt her heart race. She smiled, understanding that he was admitting feelings she had long suspected. She realized she had won his trust, respect, and now his heart. Their relationship had grown from employer-worker to something much deeper. From that day on, they worked together, laughed together, and slowly let love grow between them. Lila had transformed her life completely. The billionaire officially allowed Lila to manage more parts of the ranch. She was no longer just a worker. She was his partner in every sense. Their relationship became closer, built on respect, trust, and love. Lila's past no longer defined her. She had survived cruelty, pretended to be helpless, and used her intelligence and courage to create a new life. She was strong, beautiful, and respected by everyone. The billionaire fell in love with her fully, not just for her beauty, but for her wisdom, strength, and courage. Lila also loved him, not for his money or power, but for the care and respect he finally showed her. They spent evenings walking on the ranch, talking about the future, and enjoying each other's company. Their love grew slowly but surely, built on trust and understanding. Lila finally felt safe, loved, and powerful. She had turned a life of pain into a life of respect, love, and happiness. The billionaire had lost his coldness, and she had gained a partner, a protector, and a love she never imagined. The story ended with them standing together on the ranch, looking at the horizon. They had both been changed. She had found love and freedom, and